Life just got a whole lot more expensive for Canadians as the federal carbon tax went up 23%. We know many are struggling, but not so much with our MPs who received another pay raise April 1st. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us on location in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Toontown. Brian, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Brian, tell me more about the two taxes the Trudeau government hiked and that pay increase for our members of parliament.
Yeah, of course, the carbon tax is the one that everyone's talking about, but it's one of many taxes this year that have gone up or will go up. So 23% increase. I had one reader from Ontario send me their natural gas bill, and out of a $198 bill pre-tax or pre-sales tax, there was a $52 charge just on the carbon tax. So 26% of the bill. Well, that's going to go up by 23%. Then you have to add on the HST. She's in Ontario, obviously. So that's another $6. It's going up to $8. That $52 charge, it's going to cost her $73 for the same amount of natural gas to heat her home after this tax increase. That's dramatic. And when you add on that, you add on the 2% increase on the excise tax for beverage alcohol, so beer, wine, spirits. That hits the restaurant industry. That hits the hospitality industry. And people that are still struggling, recovering from the pandemic still. And you've got payroll taxes that went up at the beginning of the year. CPP went up. EI went up. All kinds of other taxes being added on. We've got the May 1st increase in the airport security tax that the federal government's having. Who can afford all of these tax increases? And they always say, well, it's just a little bit. It's just a little bit. You add up a bunch of little bits and it becomes a lot. And not all of us are getting 4.5% pay raises the way MPs are. So a backbench MP with no other responsibilities goes from $194,000 to $203,000 in income. The Prime Minister goes up by $17,000 to $406,000.
Wow.
These are not the types of raises most of us are getting, and it's the federal government that's imposing all these tax increases. The carbon tax just being the biggest one, and the one that's being pushed back at by provinces across the political spectrum. Even though Justin Trudeau keeps saying it's just conservative premiers, Wab Kinew wants it gone in Manitoba. Anthony Furey wants an emergency meeting out in Newfoundland. Nobody is happy with this carbon tax increase.
And the Prime Minister appears to be getting angry at all the pushback he's receiving on the federal carbon tax, Brian. And a number of Liberals are pointing to a letter from economists saying the criticisms, especially related to inflation, are unfair. Now, you argue it's the economists being unfair with their arguments. Can you explain?
Yeah, but because they are not being accurate. And I've seen this from several economists. One of them claiming on X that, oh no, the carbon tax isn't applied multiple times across the supply chain. Yes, it is. When the greenhouse grower is growing the vegetable, they're charged the carbon tax. When the trucker that picks it up to take it to the store picks it up or fills their tank, they're charged the carbon tax. The store has to heat parts of it, refrigerate others. They're charged the carbon tax. You take it home in your car, you're charged the carbon tax. All of those things add on to the cost of the goods that you and I are buying. And beyond that, what the economists cited to claim it was not impacting inflation was the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada's claim that it's 1/20th of the inflation rate is due to the carbon tax. That was debunked by Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor, who asked a very simple question. How did you calculate that? And they said, well, we only look at the impact of the carbon tax on gasoline, natural gas, and home heating oil. Well, then you're not looking at the full impact of the carbon tax. Parliamentary Budget Officer has been clear. Most Canadians, when you consider the full impact of the carbon tax, are worse off rather than better off. The Prime Minister should stop getting angry at these facts, just accept them, and be proud of his carbon tax if he really wants it.
Now, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre continues to receive a whole lot of support at his Axe the Tax rallies across the country. What are the polls saying right now? How much have the Tories really increased their lead over the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, over the last little while, they have not. They've brought it up into the double digits quite a while ago. It's well over 6 months that they've had a double-digit lead over the Liberals. But let's see, we've got I think a Leger poll this week was 16-point lead, Nano's 15-point lead, Ipsos 18-point lead, Abacus 18-point lead, leading in every part of the country except Quebec. And interestingly, one of them, I'm forgetting which one, looking at too many polls, they're all very similar. In one of them, the Conservatives were tied with the Liberals in Quebec at 25% each, with the Bloc ahead at I believe 33. So even in Quebec, they're gaining momentum according to some of the polls, but leading with every demographic group, every region of the country except Quebec, and on a message of axe the tax, which when he started this, a lot of the pundits said, oh, you can't run against the carbon tax. Well, I'd argue you can. Doug Ford did. He did that in 2018. He ripped it up when he took over from the Win Liberals. He's still campaigning against the carbon tax. And in fact, just today, held a news conference with 25 different stakeholder groups. It was about that. More than half of them were agriculture-based, talking about the impact of the carbon tax on them. And you go across this country, whether it's in Alberta where you are, in Saskatchewan where I'm sitting right now, in Ontario, elsewhere, talk to the farmers, talk to the retailers. They will tell you it's having an impact on them. It's having an impact on prices, which means it's having an impact on your budget.
Hey, Brian, let's talk about the school food program, which the Liberals say will feed an extra 400,000 kids across the country. Now, here in Alberta, we already have a school nutrition program. Other provinces have something very similar. Why this push for a national program? What's going on here?
This is an attempt by Justin Trudeau to show that he really just wants to be premier. It's also a sop to the NDP. It was one of the demands of the NDP that we have a national school food program. And they keep claiming, oh, well, so many other countries have it. We don't. We should have it. Well, we're a federation. We have confederation. The provinces are responsible for running these programs, and they do. 58,000 students fed by the Alberta School Nutrition Program. It's in the hundreds of thousands here in Ontario, where I normally am. Most provinces have these already. And here's the bizarre thing, Hal. The Prime Minister announced this without speaking to a single premier or provincial government. You would think if your goal was to have a successful school food program and the provinces already have them, you might call up the premiers or have your minister in charge of this program call up the provincial ministers in charge and say, okay, we'd like to put in $1 billion to help improve this. What do you have going right now and how can we help improve it? They didn't do that. So I spoke to several provincial governments after this announcement. I reached out to the Prime Minister's office. They all confirmed there were no talks. There were no consultations. And yet the Prime Minister says, we're doing this, thumps his chest, says he's giving another key demand to Jagmeet Singh for his coalition, and moves on. As one friend said to me, they're not interested in delivering a program. They're interested in delivering an announcement. And that's more important to them than actually feeding the kids, is saying you're going to feed the kids.
Now, apparently there was also no communication between the feds and provinces in regards to the Renters' Bill of Rights. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, same issue. Another program that is really provincial jurisdiction. When you're talking about real property, you're talking about landlord-tenant issues, you're talking about contract law. These are all provincial matters. And Justin Trudeau shows up and he says, we're going to have a Renters' Bill of Rights. We're going to have a single national standardized lease agreement between landlords and tenants. Well, wait a minute. You're not in charge of that. You have no legal authority to do that. And if you talk to the provinces, there's probably common ground they could find on that. But just like with the school food program, he flew to Vancouver, didn't talk to a single premier. His ministers didn't talk to a single one of their counterparts and says, we're going to do this. The guy is obsessed with being a provincial premier. He's not interested in foreign affairs. He's not interested in equipping our military. He's not interested in running the programs that the federal government is responsible for. He's interested in inventing new ones. Essentially, he wants to turn Alberta into Quebec in terms of Quebec should copy all the social programs. Well, just like the pharmacare program, provincial premiers are not interested in this. They're willing to talk, they're willing to see if there is common ground, but they're not interested in having Justin Trudeau come in and tell them this is how you're going to do things. And that's from Danielle Smith to Francois Legault in Quebec, Doug Ford in Ontario, and any other premier. What are you doing meddling in our jurisdiction? You have a job to do. Go do it.
Brian, at the foreign interference inquiry, we heard testimony from the head of the Liberal Party that they were aware of international students who signed up for party memberships back in 2019 and said that's a normal way of doing business for them. What else have we learned?
The Liberal Party will let anyone who's 14 or over vote in a nomination race. And it doesn't matter if you're a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada, you can vote in the nomination race. So this all relates back to Han Dong, who will be testifying shortly at the inquiry as well, along with Michael Chan and others who are facing allegations that they were part of or victims of foreign interference in some way. So Han Dong's 2019 nomination in Don Valley West in Toronto is one of the ones that people point to. That was some of the big scoops that came out showing that there were busloads of young people, foreign students at University of Toronto, at Ryerson, different groups of people who were of Chinese ethnic origin, Chinese foreign students, told to sign up for the Liberal Party, told which candidate to back, bussed there. Those are the allegations. Allegations that the consulate for the People's Republic of China was involved in helping to do this, and in some cases paying for things like school buses. These are the allegations. It's a big part of why we're having a foreign interference inquiry. And the head of the Liberal Party said, well, this is how we do things. And in terms of allowing non-residents, non-citizens to vote in nominations. And at one point he said, well, nobody complained about it. None of the other candidates complained about it. Obviously, somebody did. And we do know that the head of elections Canada raised this issue very early on. That's come out at the inquiry as well. So it's, what we're getting is confirmation of a lot of what was in the media previously, and also how little some people seemed to care.
Brian, the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, the invasion by Russia is just over 2 years right now, and many European nations have come to Canada because they do not want to support Russia, looking for our liquefied natural gas, our LNG products. They've approached Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's rebuffed many of these European leaders. We have a wonderful business opportunity as a nation to support a lot of these European countries and to beef up our GDP. What's going on here? Why did Trudeau say no?
Well, the latest was the Greek Prime Minister on a recent visit to Canada said, I'd love to be buying liquefied natural gas. Look, we've got natural gas on both coasts. A lot of people think that we could only supply Europe by using liquefied natural gas from Alberta or BC or Saskatchewan fields. But we've got the ability to get natural gas out of places like New Brunswick or Nova Scotia. We could cool that down, liquefy it, ship it to Europe. We're about to open the single lone export terminal in Kitimat. That's taken far longer than it should have. And there were several proposals for others on the West Coast. Whether it's the West Coast or the East Coast, Justin Trudeau and his government have said no. There was one that I thought was going to go through for sure called Energy Saguenay. And I thought it would go through because the plan was to take basically a spur line off of an existing pipeline that brings natural gas from Alberta fields to Ontario. And then just around the Ottawa area, put in a spur line that would take the natural gas up to the Saguenay region of Quebec, where there would be an export terminal built. The Trudeau government said no to that one. They'd given it favorable treatment previously. And then once Stephen Guilbeault came in, he even said no to that one. It is an ideological opposition. And we've heard this repeated ad nauseum by Liberal pundits and Liberal politicians saying, well, this conservative idea, they always say it's a conservative idea. It's not. It's common sense. This conservative idea would raise Canada's emissions. Okay, yes, it would. But what it would do if we were exporting to countries that are still using coal, still using dirtier fuels to generate electricity, is Compared to coal, natural gas burns at half the rate. So we could be cutting the rate in half of emissions in places like India, in China, for these power plants. And we're not doing it because they don't really care about global emissions. They care about shutting down the oil and gas industry. That is at the core of this. Stephen Guilbeault has an ideological opposition to it. Justin Trudeau has bought into Guilbeault's green zealotry. And until this government is gone, we will not have common sense on the energy file or the climate file.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Thank you.